Hey, what's up YouTube? I'm here today with a short lesson for you, and this comes from a question from somebody online. Somebody asked me, how do you suggest learning / memorizing the fretboard musically? I like this question because it's a little more specific. I get the question of like, how do you memorize notes a lot, and but I like this question because the funny thing about it is it's asking two questions, right? The first one is, how do you memorize the fretboard? That's like, how do I memorize the information that's on the fretboard? How do I know what I'm saying as I'm saying it? And then the second question is actually talking about application. How do I do that? How do I memorize that musically, right? So it's not just like, how do I memorize the alphabet from A to Z? It's how do I memorize the alphabet in a way that it's usable, right? Because really nobody cares. Well, that's not true. Very few people care if you can play at like any note on the fretboard. Most people care if you can play any note on the fretboard in a way that makes sense and is gratifying to listen to. So I want to break down both halves of that question, and hopefully it will help you and anybody else help learn your instrument better. Before I get into it, I want to say thanks for watching this video. Do me a solid and subscribe. I'm going to be bringing more content, more educational content, more musical content. And if you have anything you want me to make a video about specifically, please leave a comment down in the comment section. And thanks for watching. Okay, the first part of the question is, how do I learn the fretboard? Unfortunately, the answer that most people get is scales, which is hilarious because scales are kind of like the dumbbells of music. Like, when somebody says like, oh, how do I want to get, I want to get in better shape, I guess I should buy dumbbells. It's the same thing because people say like, well, I want to get better at music. I guess I should learn scales. But scales only work out a very specific part of your like musical brain. But the thing, and kind of like dumbbells, the thing about scales is you can use scales to learn a lot of things in music. Anything from like harmony, rhythm, improvisation. You can learn a lot of very serious musical things through scales, but you have to be very specific about how you're using the scales. You can't just practice, I can't just go this. I can't just do that and then expect to be able to play this. I can't, that's not really how it works. The first thing that I would say before you hop into a major scale, which is normally the first thing that people learn, I would say learn your chromatic scale first, right? And I'm doing this on bass, but you can do this on any instrument. I would go to, kind of your most common low note, and then I would learn it chromatically, and by chromatic up to an octave. And by chromatically, I'm talking about in half steps. Right? The other aspect of this, and this is going to be something that I say, do it with basically every exercise that I'm going to talk about, is say the notes as you are playing them. So don't just do this. Don't just do that. Because you're really only practicing like part of it. You're trying to get your brain to latch onto it, not just your hands. And so what I would say do is go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat or D sharp, E natural. Do the same thing going up, do the same thing going back down. And what I would say is if you can't do what I just did and play a chromatic scale that slowly, what I would say is don't just start doing that and then speed it up. Don't do that. What you should do is you should take actual like rhythms that people use in music and learn it like that. So I would say do whole notes. Whole notes are 4 beats long. I would say E 2 3 4, F 2 3 4, F sharp 2 3 4, G 2 3 4, G sharp, and I would just go all the way up, all the way back down. And then once you get comfortable doing that, then switch to half notes. E 2, F 2, F sharp 2, G 2, G sharp 2, A 2. Once you get comfortable with that, do it quarter notes. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Eighth notes. E, F sharp, whatever. E, F, F. I can't do it I can't say it that fast. But I think the important part is, and this has to do with the second half. So notes do not just exist for no reason with no start and stop, right? That's not how music works. And unfortunately, a lot of people play things without metronomes. They play and they practice things without, kind of like a context, right? It's just like words. Words don't mean a lot if they're not in a context. You don't know how extreme or how like funny a word is until there's context. It's the same thing. To do something musically, you have to constantly apply context. So if you've tried to learn the fretboard or like try to get better chops or something in the past, and you didn't apply actual musical concepts to it as you're learning it, chances are it didn't stick around. But if it did stick around, you probably are going to have to do that other part. You're probably going to have to do the other part anyway, which is like, okay, I know this. Now how do I apply it musically? And then you're going to go back to like whole notes, half notes, you're going to go back to like basic rhythms. You're going to go back to like basic like melodic patterns and things like that. So whenever you're learning, and if you're learning anything that I'm talking about from scratch, start with a real world application. By that I mean like rhythms, a tempo, something like that. So the first thing so going back, the first thing that you want to do is learn the chromatic scale. The reason is we're trying to learn the relationship from note to note, right? The interval is what most people call that, but that's talking about the relationship, right? So you want to learn that, and you want to make it second nature that E and F are right next to each other, and that that E is below F, right? So you want to learn not just the fact that certain notes are around each other, but you want to learn exactly how far away from each other they are. And that concept will go into everything else too. The next thing is, once you get used to a chromatic scale, once you can say all the notes up and down. And I'm not saying do the chromatic scale like 3 octaves. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying 1 octave, because you're trying to understand it all as you're learning it with your hands. The next thing is, I would pick a major scale that you're really familiar with. If you're not familiar with any major scale, that's totally fine. But I would pick one. Most people know like C. Most people will learn like C or E or G first, sometimes F. But I'm gonna do G just because my hand's right there. And what I would do is same things. Apply context. So apply actual rhythms. Do half notes, whole notes, quarter notes, something like that, 8th notes. Something you can do comfortably. And I would say the names either before or as you're playing the note. So go like G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Go back down. F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. Okay? So once you get used to doing that just as 1 octave, right? So like in my example, it's G to G and back down to G. What you want to do is this is again bringing like real world music to like an exercise that we all know, which is like major scales. There's that what I just did, G to G, is exactly like going A to Z. It very, very rarely happens in music just like that. So to only practice it that way, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. A very easy way to change it just a little is to pick kind of like, not random notes, but to pick 2 notes that are relatively unrelated in the scale. 1 note lower than the scale that you just practiced, and 1 note higher than the scale you just practiced, and do that. Because that is actually how melodies work. Melodies, if it's going to be just like a straight up, like a bunch of notes in a row, all stepwise, either half or whole step, it's not going to be 1 octave. It's going to be something completely different. And most of the time you're not starting on the root. And so your ear needs to get used to that. And also your hand needs to get used to that. And you need to get used to seeing that. So for example, I'm not going to start on G. I'm going to start a half step below on F sharp, right? And I'm not going to go up to G or F sharp. I'm going to go up to A. So I'm going to do a G major scale. starting on a low F sharp up to A. Right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do quarter notes, and that's the pattern that I'm going to do. I'm going to go F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G, F sharp. Okay, so now we're getting into the territory of you're starting to learn your neck in a more practical way, in a non-traditional way, right? So I think a great thing to do is, once you get used to that, keep expanding. Like, keep expanding until the exercise is, I'm going to start on the lowest note of my instrument and go to either the highest note on my instrument or relatively high note. So for example, I'm still going to play a G major scale, but I'm going to start on my low E, which is my open E, and I'm going to go up to, let's say, I'm going to go up to A, which is like the 14th fret on my G string. Right? I'm just talking in bass terms, but this principle, you can do this on any stringed instrument. So watch. Same thing. I'm saying my letters. I'm doing like a real world thing. This time I'll do half notes this time, right? So, that gives me a chance to really think about it. And I'm going from the lowest note on my, normally a 4-string bass I'm going from the lowest note on a 4-string bass up to just a relatively high note. It's not the highest note on my instrument, but it's like a relatively high note. Okay, so E, I guess I'll say 2 in between everything. E to F sharp to G to A to B to C to D to E to F sharp to G to A to B to C to D to E to F sharp to G to A, back down, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G, F sharp, E. Okay, so I'm going to go back over the reasons that I did it that way. 1, I'm applying real-world context to what I'm doing, right? So that's already putting me in the generally musical department, right? Because that's how real music works. It's generally in very defined rhythms with clear beginnings and clear ends. Not only that, but I started on a note that's not the root. I started at the lowest note on a normal 4-string bass, and I went up to a relatively high note. Because that's kind of how melodies, if we're trying to do things melodically, that's how melodies actually work. Nobody really wants to hear like just an octave. You know what I mean? A lot can happen in an octave, but even if you were to play an octave, even if somebody finds an example on YouTube or whatever and posts it in my comments, this is like, see, this is just a scale. This melody is just a scale. Chances are they're having to overcome that like really basic nature. The same way that there's not a lot of words that are just a certain group of letters in a row. You know what I mean? That you pick and choose those letters. So a way to simulate that. Also, a way to show you, what notes go into a key. A lot of people, I come in contact with a lot of people, but when I'm teaching them, they only know something in a certain octave. And, they don't think about the fact that, if you're like a beginner or you just haven't really thought about things this way, you might not think that this low E is in the key of G. You might not really think about that. But, this exercise is trying to get your mind headed in the overall melodic direction and musical direction. Okay, and I've been doing this already, but part of what you need to do is you need to think about the principle that you're learning, right? So maybe you're just memorizing notes. Maybe it's more about the, your hands. Maybe you know it in your brain, but you're learning a new instrument, so you're having to just memorize the notes. But what you need to do is don't just practice the thing. You need to put a task to what you're learning, right? And this is where it gets more fun, and it's less monotonous. Is you kind of make up little tiny exercises. That's why one thing I encourage people to do, and this kind of crosses over into the how do I do it musically department, is learn every melody. Just learn any song that you're playing, even if you're a drummer, even if you're a guitar player and you're only playing chords, whatever you're doing, learn to play the melodies that of the songs that are relevant to you, right? And when you're doing that, say the notes before you play them. Play them in time. Play them slower. Even if you're not playing them in the time of the song, pick a note value and or a pattern of rhythms and play it in that. I used to do that. I used to do that all the time with melodic passages. I have a child, and so one thing I've been doing is she hands me this ukulele and says like, play Row Your Boat, or play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or something like that. So one thing you can do is pick those songs which have very easy melodies, but solid melodies. They're solid melodies as far as like the intervals. They're memorable. They're easy to sing, things like that. It's funny, they all run together for me. So it's like the melody I'm thinking of is Old MacDonald. I was like, wait, what song is it? But so just take that first one. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strip away the context that the song has given me. I'm just going to apply a new real world music context to it. So I'm going to do it all quarter notes, right? And then the other thing is I'm going to say the names before I play them. G, 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 D, E, E, D, B, B, A, G. God, it's hard to do in a different rhythm. All I did was do constant quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So and part of what's fun about that is you can do that in a billion different ways. I used to do that when I was learning, when I was in like high school, and I was like learning to read a lot better, like read music, because of it was my mom's advice. Actually, my mom is a musician and is a really amazing reader. I think that's one of her like strongest points. So she has all these like little tricks to like figuring out how to read and how to like learn passages easier. And so one of them is to take a passage and just apply a bunch of different rhythms to it. But the great thing is you're doing a lot of things at once. If you're doing what I'm saying, where you're saying the notes before you play them, one is you're learning them on the neck. You're learning like, okay, here's where these notes are. Here's how far apart they are. Here are the intervals. Even if you're not naming the intervals, a lot of people go to a lot of trouble to be like, okay, this is a fifth, this is a third. And I think that's great because it's great. That's something that'll help also, is just memorizing patterns. But I think even past that is just like kind of learning what those intervals feel like, even if you're not giving those intervals a specific name. But if you're doing that, but also you're practicing a lot of different real world aspects. So if I'm going like, so if I'm taking just those notes, right? So I'm going to practice you heard me do it as quarter notes. Here's, I could do it as half notes and whole notes, but it would take forever. But I've done that a lot though with a lot of different passages. So I encourage you to do that as you're practicing like different melodies and like getting new things under your hands and things like that. Definitely practice as whole notes and half notes. Like, can't stress that enough. It's an amazing learning experience. But so like, let's say if I just did 8 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So it's interesting because it like puts it in a new light, you know what I mean? And it helps, it doesn't just get my hands used to playing the melody in one way. Another thing that you can do is triplets. 1, 2, triplet. right? Like that's like a pretty cool sensation, is to like, because then you're kind of in drummer world where you're like, your foot is going up, down, or down, up, 1 and 2 and 3, but you're playing triplet, triplet, triplet. You know what I mean? So I think as you're learning every, and I really do encourage you, like, theme songs. A lot of us these days, we don't watch as much TV, but we'll watch a lot of YouTube. There's a lot of YouTubes that have like little jingles and little theme songs and stuff like that. Learn those. Like, that's great. There's a ton of content creators that I watch that have like, they'll have like little jingles before certain videos, depending on what type of video it is. And so I love learning those. I love learning theme songs. I subbed once for a group in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'm from, that did all like, they did it in a jazz way, so like people would take solos and stuff, but it was all theme songs from like shows that I grew up watching with my mom on like Nick at Night and stuff like that, like Golden Girls and Sanford and Son and stuff like that. So, which was super awesome. And like even theme songs of like kids shows like Power Rangers, like that's a killer theme song. There's a lot of really great theme songs. And so when you do those, put a task to it. So say the note names, and pay attention to where your hand is and watch it happen as you're playing it, because what you're doing that entire time, and what you'll kind of learn is like, you'll learn a spot on the neck like really, really well, and you'll understand all the notes. But the cool thing is, you'll learn like little things like, okay, there's a D and there's a G. Okay, the neck is laid out in a way where like that interval is going to feel either like that or close to that, depending on what instrument you play, all the time. So here's a D, G, here's a D and a G, there's a D and a G, there's a D and a G. So the cool thing is you'll learn like, okay, these notes are kind of always close together, and so then it'll be something like, okay, you'll learn a G on your instrument, maybe that you didn't know that was there before, but then you'll realize like, okay, that means there's a D somewhere close by. So let me go figure that out. So don't shortchange just learning one spot of the neck. It's really great. I don't know if I would go as far to say like start on one spot on the neck. I mean, I guess you could. I guess the first way that I learned bass was I started what's called half position, which is only the first 3 frets. And that was really helpful, but I got out of that really fast, or like the method that I was learning through, which was called Samandal, it got me out of that really fast. I moved, I think in like my second or third scale, I was already moving past that. So this next one is for like chordal instruments. When you play a chord on guitar, for example, learn all of the notes. I know that sounds dumb, but that's going to help you, memorize it also. Okay, I don't have my guitar plugged in, but I'll kind of like, so there's just a G chord, and so now I'm going to go through and I'm going to learn all the notes. And this is why we learn the chromatic scale, right? If you don't know what note it is already, right, obviously because you're learning it, you can count up. You can count up starting from the lowest open string you have, right? Because you should learn in there like how many half steps something is away from something else. So for example, that's a G, and I'll do it like I don't know this already. So this 3rd fret, so I know that's a low E, E, F, F sharp, G. Okay, that's a G. And if you want, write down, okay, that's a G. Next one, okay, that's A, B flat, B. Okay, right? Next ones are open strings, D, G. Okay, next one is B, C, C sharp, D. Right, write down D. Last one is E, F, F sharp, G. Write all those down. And listen, it's going to take a long time. Right? Like this whole, like all these like little things when you do them the first time, like counting up the half steps, writing it down, all of that takes a long time. But here's the deal, and this is how music is, and I try and tell everybody this. Music, unlike a lot of other things, is hard to learn at first, right? Barrier to entry is a little bit higher than people would like to say. It is hard to learn first, but what happens is you do a lot of work up front, and then you hit a spot, and then after that, all of the information just starts repeating itself. That's it. I swear to you, that's really all it is. It's not, it is music, and especially for like a casual musician, it is not like other things where, you know, no matter where you're at, you're constantly learning like completely fresh and new information. Music is just not like that. Everything builds on something else, and everything is related to something else. When you get into like real world music, you know, there's a ton of academic music where, you know, they'll take the same information and just like somebody else has given a new name, and so you got to learn this new name, like whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning music, you know, learning the fretboard and learning your instrument in a way that is like practically applicable and a way that is like easy, and it's easy to memorize the notes on your fretboard in a way where you can, you know, apply it to your music. So so far I've talked about ways to apply scales, right? Scales, the dumbbell of music. If you do it this way, you're practicing this muscle, so that's why you have to do it this way, so you can do your shoulder. That's why you do it behind you, so you can do your tricep. You know, scales are the same thing. You have to practice scales in different ways to learn different things. The other thing is is learning like every tiny little melody that you can, because that's the fun part. The melodies are the fun part. And so you know, and that's like immediately applicable, because you know, melodic content, doesn't matter what genre, follows similar rules. You know, like minus a couple situations, melodies in general follow similar rules. You know, it might be more or a lot less complicated, but in general, it's gonna be the same rules. You have tension, release, stuff like that. And you know, on top of those things, doing the two things that I was talking about, which is saying the letter names before or as you're playing it. You know, and the other thing is putting a task to what you're doing. Don't just aimlessly start shedding something. Give it a context. That's how music works. Music is all in context, and a lot of it is about context too. Okay, I hope this was helpful. It's a complicated question, so it kind of took a semi-complicated answer. But I hope I've given you something to think about as far as like ways that you can memorize the fretboard and learn things in a musical way, you know, concepts or just straight up exercises to do that. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about, or if you want me to like, you know, continue to talk about something, feel free to message me on Instagram at Jhow275, or put it in the comments, and I'll come back and check and hopefully give you what you're looking for. I'm here to help you get where you want to go musically. So any comments about what kind of content you want to see, anything else you want me to cover, I'd be more than happy to do that for you. So thank you guys. Please consider subscribing, and I'll see you around.